This time has above all reminded William and me to reflect and be grateful for the simple yet important things in life, which so many of us often take for granted.
According to an insider who worked for many years at Kensington Palace, Catherine, the woman destined to become the future queen of the United Kingdom, is living in a world of suffocating control behind the perfect public smiles. Explosive claims leaked from a former royal advisor have sent shockwaves through Britain, from being banned from using social media freely to having every centimeter of her outfits strictly monitored, to cold, rigid rules that even extend to her own children. Few realize that every time Catherine steps out in an elegant dress amid the cheering crowds beneath those luxurious fabrics lie secrets that have never been made public. Even more disturbing are the ancient palace traditions that leave even young royals feeling stifled, yet no one is allowed to object. The source also claims Catherine has repeatedly been pushed to the brink of mental strain by the invisible protocols that tighten around her life every single day. But the most shocking revelations may still be hidden behind the firmly closed doors of the British royal family. Has Catherine truly lost her freedom since the day she entered the monarchy? And what secrets within the palace are so oppressive that even a strong woman like her has had to endure them in silence for years? The May rain poured down on London like a grey curtain, blurring the sharp spires of Kensington Palace. Inside a study filled with the scent of oak and faint Earl Grey tea, Sir Alistair Vance sat lost in thought at his desk. At 72, the former senior royal advisor, a man who had spent over 3 decades orchestrating ceremonies and guarding the deepest secrets of the House of Windsor, looked like a living statue of history. He had witnessed generational transitions, guided 3 kings and future queens. Facing him was not a prince or minister, but a stack of unpublished memoirs containing the invisible yet brutal rules that were slowly suffocating the most powerful woman in the royal family. At that moment, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the future queen of the United Kingdom, Alistair gently turned the yellowed pages, his thin fingers pausing at the spring of 2011, the time of the wedding of the century. He remembered clearly the eyes of the young Kate Middleton back then. Bright, free eyes, full of ambition. But the old advisor knew better than anyone that from the moment the sapphire engagement ring, once belonging to the late Princess Diana, slipped onto her finger, Catherine's independent life had officially ended. She had not simply married the man she loved, she had surrendered her entire freedom to a vast, cold institutional machine. The list of absolute rules began with a harsh reality. Catherine would never again be allowed to live like an ordinary person. Every step, every smile, even every blink before the cameras was dictated by an invisible code. It was a set of behavioral protocols never printed in any book, yet embedded in every breath taken within the palace. Alistair recalled the hours-long etiquette lessons where Catherine had to practice getting out of a car without letting her dress ride up, tilting her head at precisely 45 degrees when greeting heads of state, and keeping her voice in a neutral tone that revealed no personal emotion. The suffocating weight of that gilded cage did not stop at grand ceremonies. It seeped into the most private corners of motherhood. Alistair sighed softly as he remembered the wave of public amazement in the summer of 2013 when Prince George was born. The world had only seen a happy young family stepping out of St. Mary's Hospital under hundreds of camera flashes. They had no idea that behind the closed palace doors, a silent but intense debate had taken place over the choice of godparents for the future king. Catherine, with a mother's natural instinct, had hoped to choose her childhood confidants or close members of the Middleton family, people who truly understood and loved her. But the Church of England and royal advisors had immediately intervened. The strict rules of a nation with an established church required those spiritual roles to be filled by individuals with solid political standing. Appropriate aristocratic lineage or absolute loyalty to the crown. The choice was not based on personal affection, but on a strategic chessboard designed to strengthen diplomatic ties and ensure the heir's utmost security. Catherine had to remain silent and accept that more distant duty-bound names would appear on her son's baptismal certificate. The old advisor leaned back in his chair, his cloudy eyes gazing out at the rain-streaked window. He knew the public outside always craved royal perfection. They applauded Catherine's flawless elegance without ever suspecting the crushing pressure bearing down on her shoulders. That perfection was not natural. It was forged through sacrifice, through grinding away personal edges to fit the rigid mold of history. Every privilege she received came at a steep price: her autonomy. The velvet curtain of royal life appeared magnificent, yet through Alistair's lens, it revealed deep psychological fractures. Catherine had to learn to abandon her sense of self and become an unchanging symbol in a constantly shifting world. The public's shock when these secrets gradually emerged only proved how vast the gulf was between media illusion and harsh reality. Alistair closed the file. The dry sound of paper slapping shut echoed in the quiet room. The memoir was complete, laying bare a stark truth. Before she could ever touch the Queen's crown, Catherine had already left her freedom on the other side of the palace gates. The image of a radiant woman before the public was beginning to show dark shades of pressure and loneliness, foreshadowing even stranger and more oppressive rituals that awaited her ahead. The deeper one ventured into the endless corridors of Sandringham and Buckingham, the clearer it became that the constraints were not limited to grand state ceremonies. They had hardened into the smallest daily habits. Alistair Vance turned the pages describing the winter days when ancient rituals were carried out with extreme precision, turning every family gathering into a performance heavy with pressure for Catherine. The public always pictured the warm glow of lights from the palace windows on Christmas night, but few knew about the antique mechanical brass scales placed right at the entrance to the dining hall. The custom dated back to King Edward VII, who required every family member and guest to step on the scales before and after the Christmas feast. For a modern woman like Catherine, who was constantly mindful of her image, it was at first shocking, then an indescribable suffocation. The movement of the needle was not merely to prove that guests had been generously fed. It felt like a raw physical inspection disguised as tradition. Standing on the scales under the scrutinizing eyes of her elders, Catherine had to maintain a frozen smile, hiding her discomfort as her body was measured like royal merchandise. That oppressive atmosphere continued to envelop Christmas Eve. Instead of the relaxed, cozy feel of a normal British family Christmas morning, Catherine had to adapt to opening gifts on the evening of the 24th. A tradition steeped in the German style of the old house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. The presents were laid out on a long wooden table, and the giving was not based on material value or personal sincerity, but on a silent competition of whimsical, inexpensive, yet exquisitely chosen items that must never cause offense. Catherine had often felt her heart race while preparing gifts, terrified that a wrong choice could make her the subject of whispered conversations at afternoon tea the next day. Class and gender separation remained stark even during breakfast on important holidays. According to long-standing rules, the male members of the family gathered in the main dining room for a hearty breakfast of kidneys, eggs, and bacon. Meanwhile, Catherine and the other women were kept in their private bedrooms, served a light meal of fruit and tea brought directly to their beds by attendants. This isolation was not a pampering privilege, but a cold reminder of women's status and role in an outdated feudal system where even the most private family moments were divided by walls of protocol. A former palace staff member who had served many years in the royal kitchens once admitted to Alistair how stifling the environment was. Many younger family members had tried to avoid or openly shown their exhaustion, but not Catherine. She endured it all with astonishing patience. Her eyes, as she looked at the elaborately arranged plates of food at the grandfather clocks, deliberately set a few minutes fast to ensure no one could ever be late, held a profound resignation. The luxurious palace spaces with their gilded wall paintings, vivid red velvet drapes, and flickering candlelight now appeared to Alistair like a maze full of invisible traps. Catherine moved through it with light, careful steps, fully aware that even a slight frown or an incorrectly placed fork could be seen as rebellion against the institution. What should have been festive joy was merely a glittering cover for a reality of restraint where personal freedom was crushed beneath the wheel of century-old rituals. Alistair Vance turned to a new chapter in the file, where the dazzling light of the digital age clashed violently with the solid stone walls of Buckingham Palace. For a woman of the 21st century, like Catherine, control no longer stopped at brick walls. It stretched into the endless realm of the internet. She was never allowed to have a personal social media account, no spontaneous status updates, no hastily taken everyday photos posted at will. Every account in her name was in fact a media machine, operated by a team of psychologists and image strategists. Catherine understood that a single like or a seemingly harmless comment from her could trigger a political crisis or spark a wave of speculation in the stock market. She had to learn to suppress her desire to share herself, to view the world's interactions through a filter stripped of all personality. When she looked at her phone screen, her fingers would often pause over ordinary apps, a wave of loneliness rising as she realized she was the only person deprived of a natural voice in a world where everyone else was free to speak. This surveillance hardened into a mechanized process for her wardrobe. Every outfit Catherine wore was never simply fashion. It was a political message, a communications weapon calculated down to the last millimeter. Alistair recalled the hours-long fitting sessions in the private dressing room. It was not a place for a woman to enjoy the pleasure of beauty, but a high-pressure workshop for crafting symbols. The royal dressmakers measured meticulously, testing the fabric's stretch under different lighting to ensure that no camera angle from the waiting press pack could capture an unflattering moment. The detail that shocked the public most yet haunted Catherine daily was the small lead weights sewn discreetly into the hems of her dresses. These heavy metal pieces were designed to hold her skirts down against sudden gusts of wind at airports or outdoor events. As a result, every step Catherine took carried real physical weight. She had to move with graceful lightness, as if gliding while constantly countering the pull of the weighted hem to avoid any embarrassing incident in front of hundreds of watchful lenses. It was a dance of endurance where a woman's body was forced into a perfection so extreme it felt inhuman. Under the pressure of this pre-programmed perfection, Catherine gradually felt her sense of self being worn away. Standing before the mirror, she no longer saw the Kate Middleton of old, only a constructed entity designed to please the public. Her eyes, as she gazed at the lead-weighted dresses and the thick media schedules with posts timed to the minute, revealed a deep exhaustion. She had become a living symbol, a walking monument meticulously carved to represent the stability of the monarchy at the complete cost of burying the ordinary vulnerable woman inside. Alistair Vance gently pushed up his glasses and turned to the chapter detailing Catherine's travels. If media control had silenced her voice, then the strict safety rules transformed this woman's every movement into a series of pre-programmed dry and hypervigilant activities. Wherever Catherine set foot, the first thing she saw was not the scenery or the smiles of local people, but the shadow of the elite protection team from the Royal and Diplomatic Protection Command. Their presence served as a constant reminder that the outside world was full of danger. and she no longer had the right to take risks or walk freely. Even the most basic human instinct, eating and drinking, became a headache of security concerns. On international tours or at official banquets, Catherine's menu was always strictly limited and tightly controlled by the royal medical team. Dishes containing garlic or onions were completely forbidden to ensure her breath remained perfect when meeting heads of state. More alarmingly, fresh seafood and rare meat favorites for many never appeared on her plate to minimize any risk of food poisoning or sudden allergies that could disrupt the official schedule. Catherine had to learn to suppress her personal culinary preferences, facing plates of bland, safe food and chewing them with graceful poise under hundreds of watchful eyes. However, the cruelest restraint on her instincts as a wife and mother was the regulation concerning air travel. Alistair still remembered clearly the deep anxiety etched in Catherine's eyes every time her family prepared for a long trip. According to an unbreakable protocol designed to protect the line of succession, Prince William and Catherine were strongly advised and at times effectively forced not to fly together with all their children on the same plane. The rule existed to prevent the worst-case scenario, a single tragic accident that could wipe out multiple heirs to the throne at once. Preparing for every flight became psychological torture for Catherine. She had to accept watching her husband lead one child onto one aircraft while she boarded another separate plane with their other child. Standing on the runway, hearing the roar of the engines and feeling the cold wind on her face, her heart tightened with a mother's primal fear. The thought of separation, of placing the royal bloodline on a scale against the wholeness of their small family, made her shudder. Every successful journey brought Catherine not the joy of discovery, but only a sigh of relief that the life and death equation had temporarily been solved. Through the old advisor's notes, it became clear that Catherine gradually realized a bitter truth in the world of the crown. The duty to preserve the institution was always placed above everything else, crushing and overriding every personal desire, emotion, or most sacred bond of an ordinary human being. The next pages in Alistair Vance's memoir were stained with dark ink, as if soaked in the deepest sorrow he had ever witnessed in Catherine's journey through motherhood. The old advisor turned the notes about the three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. To the public, they were elegant young princes and princesses, the bright future of the monarchy. But for Catherine, the most painful and hardest truth to accept was this harsh reality. Even the children she had carried and given birth to did not fully belong to her small family's decisions. Royal protocol wrapped itself around the children's lives from their very first breath. Catherine had to relinquish the simple right of an ordinary mother to choose her children's names based on personal taste or loving memories. Every name had to be carefully drawn from a centuries-old family tree, carrying the weight of history and the approval of the royal family. Even their surnames, the royal titles that accompanied them, and the exact outfits they would wear at their christenings, all followed a script prepared generations in advance. Alistair could still vividly recall Catherine during her children's christening ceremonies in the royal chapel. Amid the echoing hymns and the soft glow of candlelight, she held the baby in her arms, gazing intently at the Honiton lace and white satin christening gown, an exact replica of the one worn by Queen Victoria's eldest daughter in 1841. In that moment, Catherine's tender embrace was not only pure maternal love, she was lifting up a piece of the institution itself. That magnificent yet heavy gown was like a symbol of the gilded cage already waiting to lock around her children's lives. A close palace insider once shared with Alistair the late-night moments when Catherine sat silently in her children's bedrooms. Those were the times she confronted the quiet pain of a powerless mother. She knew she could not give her children a completely free childhood, could not run with them across public lawns without security agents trailing close behind, and could not shield them from long-lens cameras always ready to capture every toddler tantrum or rebellious moment. The rare tears Catherine shed in the darkness were not for her own exhaustion, but for the future she already saw. For her children who would one day repeat the same restricted, identity-stripped existence she was enduring. Behind the elegance, power, and perfectly staged family photographs released on every birthday, there lay a cruel trade-off. Catherine had to swallow her tears, learning to accept that duty to the crown had claimed her sacred right to motherhood. She was not simply raising children for herself or for William. She was polishing foundation stones to support an empire, even if the price was the breaking of a mother's heart. Alistair Vance slowly set his fountain pen down beside the final page of the memoir. The old advisor's list of absolute taboos, once revealed to the outside world, immediately triggered a psychological earthquake in the public consciousness. The velvet curtain of mystery shrouding Buckingham Palace was ripped open, exposing a cold reality that left everyone stunned. People began to look at the royal family, and especially at Catherine, through an entirely different lens. No longer pure admiration for a powerful symbol, but astonishment at a life imprisoned by duty. Public opinion quickly split into two fierce camps across forums and newspapers. One group, pragmatic and stern, argued that all the restrictions, the lead weights sewn into dress hems, and the compromised role of motherhood were a fair price to pay for occupying the highest position in the kingdom. They saw it as a straightforward duty to the nation. On the other side, a powerful wave of deep sympathy surged. Millions of people, especially mothers, felt a sharp ache at the suffocation Catherine had to endure. They recognized that behind those flawless, radiant smiles was a woman learning to survive inside a machine that crushed individuality. Amid the storm of public debate, the most deeply moving detail came from a faded sheet of paper discovered in the depths of the royal archives, an old letter believed to have been written by Catherine herself on a lonely winter night years earlier. The delicate yet trembling handwriting pressed deeply into the paper, revealing the most private thoughts of the Princess of Wales. In it, she did not complain about her packed schedule of tours, nor resent the strict rules of the church or the security team. What caused her the greatest pain and fear was the helpless realization that her life, every second and every minute, no longer belonged to her. The identity of Kate Middleton had been completely swallowed by the title of princess and later queen. But the wheel of history and the institution never stopped for the inner voice of one individual. The very next day, while the arguments outside still raged, the royal car rolled through the palace gates once more. Catherine stepped out into the glare of hundreds of waiting camera lenses. The hem of her dress still weighed heavily with safety weights, her hands still clasped at the precise protocol angle. And on her head the crown sparkled with diamonds, reflecting a cold, proud light. Catherine took a quiet, deep breath, lifted her chin, and offered a radiant, flawless smile to the cheering crowd. It was an act of courage, or more accurately, a proud surrender to destiny. The story ended as her figure gradually disappeared along the mall, leaving behind the crown, a life full of pressure and lonely silences that the world could only ever admire, but never fully understand. After finishing the story, in your opinion, is Catherine's complete sacrifice of personal freedom and maternal instincts in exchange for the royal crown a worthwhile trade-off or a tragedy of fate? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.